when something works and you've had the experience of knowing the many things that didn't, it's night and day. There's like no mistaking it, right? Basically, so we met Paul Graham, and then when we walked in the room, we introduced ourselves. Like, hey, I'm Han. This is Hanbi. We're from Mintlify. Like immediately, the first thing he said was like, "Well, Mintlify, like, what a terrible, terrible name. You gotta change that."
Hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling Dev Tools. I'm joined today in person by Han from Mintlify. Han, thanks for joining.
Thanks so much for inviting me. I am a huge fan of the podcast. It's truly an honor to be here.
Thank you. And so Mintlify is docs as a service, would you say?
Docs as a service, yeah. We like to think it's like the modern standard for documentation.
Yeah, okay, amazing. So we're going to talk about your story, and we're going to talk about how to actually make good docs.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. Should I start off a little bit more about the story of Mintlify and how we got here?
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mintlify as a company was originally founded, not even called Mintlify, fun fact. Nice. This was, it was a hot second ago, very late of 2021. Me and my co-founder Hanbi, we've built products for most of our lives, just independent of each other. So I started coding when I was 11. Hanbi also was like a really early, just like everyone else in the Bay Area, basically. So we just like started building products super early on, and I think over the course of my high school, college, it was always like building products that other people would love to use. And I think it was like, to me, the really special thing is about building for people that we could have related to, and we could have understood people like us, basically. And like, even for instance, like my first ever product that I ever built was like this like mobile app for like my middle school, basically.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was like, here's how you plan your classes. Here's like how you, what's the lunch schedule today?
Wow. Do people use it?
Oh yeah. Oh, no, that product had PMF for sure, no doubt about it. The problem was there was like a market size of like 200 people. That was the one issue. And middle school students, I don't know if you've tried selling to them. Their budget constraints not fantastic.
Not so much.
Not. Wish it could have been better. It's a market sizing TAM problem for sure. And then for high school, it was like, building for, like other students, and then come college, Hanbi and I, again, my co-founder, we met, wanting to kind of build this kind of like product that could have helped students at our college plan out their graduation requirements. So the idea was very simple. Our college had a very decentralized, like no one really knew what they were doing.
Like kind of complex around classes to take.
Exactly. And then at the end of the 3 years, you're like, oh, like, am I actually on track to get my diploma?
Yeah.
And the school didn't really have any great services, and it wasn't super robust. And so we're like, I bet we can solve that. And I met Hanbi just being like, hey, like, this is a problem I think we want to tackle, and built it, launched it, and I think even to this day, I think about like half of the entire college uses it like every semester. Yeah, something Hanbi and I are both very particularly proud of.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And thank you.
Which college is it? Just in case people are.
Yeah, it's Cornell. If you went there, I'd love to. Again, if you use it, definitely let me know. And so it's always been around building for people that we could have understood. And during COVID, Hanbi and I also had we did a startup together. So we got more of this exposure to just building an actual company together. After that, we literally then took our slightly different paths for a little bit. Hanbi I went to work at big tech. I went to work at Facebook for a little bit. Hanbi went to work at Duolingo.
Cool.
And then afterwards, we just tried those, and we're like, I don't know, man. I don't think big tech is for us. Yeah. I love building products that people loved, and that we could have just genuinely helped, especially people who are like us. That there was something just so truly special about that. So I literally called up Hanbi right afterwards. I was like, Hanbi, do you want to run it back? Do you want to go do this again?
yeah.
And this time, let's do it for like developers, because that's an audience that like, you know, we've been, I mean, yeah, we were just engineers our entire lives. We've just been builders. So let's go take a crack at that. And for some reason she was like, yeah, let's do it. Cut forward, this is senior year of college. You know, we just started cracking it away. Hanbi and I initially started with, our very first entry was, oh man, I don't know if you remember, like there was a OpenAI, I think this was after they relaunched like GPT-3, had like a model called Codex. Do you remember that?
That was the code. Was that the code one?
That was the code one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they just launched Codex, and we literally got like access to the API, because at the time it was all waitlisted. And I don't know how I think I just like begged everyone I knew who worked at OpenAI for access, got access to it. And I was like, man, like this is so cool.
Yeah.
Let's go build something for developers specifically for this.
Yeah.
And so we literally took the model, and then we like built around all of these cool features that were like, oh, you can translate your code from like Python to TypeScript. You could explain this code in English. You could do all these cool things with it. That it was so fundamentally about like helping developers.
Yeah.
We didn't really honestly know what to do with the model. That was the really reason why we made it so big.
Yeah.
Like zero clue what problems we solved.
You were tinkering.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It applies to the strategy of a lot of the companies nowadays. But we just were like, let's try this. We put it out there, and it like blew up.
Really?
Yeah, we launched on Product Hunt. It did super well there. Got like #1 product of the day.
Wow.
And again, like we literally just like we had the model, and then we just sprinted it out to market.
Yeah.
And then got like, I think like 10,000 signups on the first day.
10,000.
Yeah.
First day.
It was really, really bonkers, because
Really wild.
yeah, we never expected it to do that well. We just thought it was like it's such a cool thing that like, you know, we just wanted to see if it solved problems.
Yeah. And this was translating code from like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was built to be in a way where it was like kind of multifunctional,
Yeah.
where you could like translate the code, like describe what it does in English.
Yeah.
It could translate code. It could calculate like the time complexity.
Yeah.
A lot of those like kind of like more like it's like individual use cases. It was like a lot of prompt engineering basically. And it was just like an early version of like anything that dealt with like, you know, these LLMs and code.
Yeah.
And it was like, and it's something about that just kind of caught fire. And what happened truly was that was probably, I would say, like on that for the launch, the first, the only, and the best thing that happened to it. Because what really happened was, like, if you looked at it on a retention graph, right? Like if you looked at it from a graph, it literally like, okay, from day one it got to 10K, and then over like the rest of it, it's like slowly decayed into like oblivion and just irrelevance, which meant it wasn't solving a real problem. And I think we learned a lot from that. We just kind of got this cool hype factor, but again, not really useful at the end of the day. That was literally what got us into this. During that period of which, you know, we still somehow decided to apply for YC. By the time they interviewed us, our numbers were looking like just down and to the right. And we were just like, yeah, guys, this didn't work. But here's something else that could, you know? And for some reason, they decided to take a shot on us. And, you know, we did a YC for the Winter 22 batch. You know, and then during that batch and many time afterwards, you know, still kept it with developers, but had a difficult time figuring out exactly what we wanted to do. Tried a bunch of different ideas. I think it took 8 pivots until eventually we got to building Mintlify into what it is today. It was always in the similar space of something for developers. It was always like, you know, how do we help them like understand a little bit more? How do we help them enable them to go build better stuff? But no, didn't really get the right footing until many tries in.
Yeah, and what was it like the first like iteration of like Mintlify in its current form? Was it?
Yeah.
Or was it like?
Yeah.
More or less what you do now?
The initial vision of Mintlify was actually, it was actually super simple. It was literally just like, Hanbi and I, after basically pivoting 8 times, we were kind of like we're like really almost out of ideas by that point. We just were like, like we've tried a bunch of different things that we thought worked, some that we spent weeks on, some that we spent like, a month or two on. Nothing really stuck. We just kept throwing it and it just didn't work. And during that whole period, there were all these people who were like, hey, because we were always in the space for a developer, like some sort of like communication, right? They were like, hey, like, I just want to flag this problem by you. Like, just our docs are really bad. And, like, maybe this is something that's worth experimenting. And Hanbi and I kind of listened to that a lot of time. And we've had interview after interview of people like just telling us that. And then even we thought of our own experiences building like the docs. And we're like, yeah, like it's not great, but like it does seem kind of like there's a lot of options. You could always build it in-house. And it wasn't until literally when we were like, basically after the 8 pivots, we're like, man, like honestly, like we're out of ideas at this point. Let's just try this thing that like we actually weren't too sure about, about like just building the docs that we've always wished we had. And then so over the span of like a weekend, we just whipped up this early version of like this docs that looked great, that had these like, great tooling, that had search out of the box, that had like a lot of like these cool like things that Mintlify has today, just focusing on the quality and really making it good. And I literally went to my roommate, who was another YC founder at the time, and I literally went to him and I was like, I literally just like took his original crappy docs and I just poured it over on Mintlify. I just was like, hey dude, like, here you go. Oh, and by the way, I'm gonna help you change your DNS. So it just goes over to our setup. And by the way, it had a lot of like the core features that Mintlify has today, but it didn't really work. It was literally just static pages, and I just showed it to him. He thought it was cool, and then I was like, all right, bet I'm just gonna make it make it so it's on our site now. He did it, and then the team loved it. Their customers really loved it, and
what do you think they loved about it compared to?
It was just about the fact that we made like the docs experience a lot more interactive. We really focused on like the quality of the docs.
Like running code or like snippets or like kind of, selecting lang. Is it that sort of thing?
Literally exactly that. And also on like the engineering experience, be like, hey, like now you can actually edit everything in Markdown and keep it within like your core code base. And a lot of like these, like the different things that like kind of make Mintlify stand out a little bit today. And then he gave a crack at it, the team loved it. And then I think just from that, I think we just kind of like made a announcement about it and then made a post about it. And then just like there came this like outpour of people who then were like, oh man, like I would actually love to use you guys for like our docs option. It's really not great. I think we got like 10 customers in the first week.
Wow.
And then I think like maybe 20 by the next. And then by that point I was like, oh man, like people are coming. It seems like it's a business. We're like asking them to pay and they just like subscribe the day of. That didn't happen before. And I think the one thing I always think of now in terms of like the many things we've tried and didn't work, I always tell people, I'm like, the nice thing about this is that when you come into a thing that does, there's like no mistaking it, right? If you will know when something, you will always have a hard time telling if something works when it's not working. But when something works and you've had the experience of knowing the many things that didn't, it's night and day. And when we kind of hit that, it just really felt like this kind of really magical moment. I was like, man, people are jumping on board to take more demo calls with me so they can get access to it before, like more than I could realistically take. And that was so different than what it was before.
That's a really interesting journey. And so then what was like, once you had this kind of like people are paying, was it just like a blur? Like what happened after that? Like,
I think it's always funny because, you talk to a lot of founders about like their stories and they always tell you about like the early days. Because I think the reason for that is because those were like the most memorable because they were the most painful. As the company grew, like from, the first 10 docs to now like, the thousands, that was just more so like just repeating and optimizing this process.
Interesting.
And so that's like a little bit less exciting, but like there were still a lot of like challenges even in between. It was like, we had to figure out how we can actually go and, for instance, make like getting a customer to come to use our product more scalable. We had to figure out how to build onboarding. We had to actually figure out how to like build these settings. the fun fact is, even for our first few customers, they actually couldn't update the docs. Like, because it was so hard coded basically,
Yeah.
that it was just these like static pages.
Yeah.
And I was so grateful that the first few customers actually didn't need to for some reason.
Yeah.
Because it took us like another few weeks to actually go build that. And I literally remember when we eventually actually go build those functions, they were like, oh, by the way, Han, I just wanted to mention, like, we got to go update the docs now. And I was like, oh, great. Like, you know, like, that's awesome. But if they'd asked any time earlier, we would have not been in the.
That was like a lesson as well of like, if you have something, like, if you can't give them like a really clunky experience, then maybe it's not pressing enough of a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or you've launched too late or something like that. If it's not like,
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And before we like start talking about docs, do you want to tell us why Paul Graham told you to? Paul Graham interaction.
Oh man, yes. Yes, unfortunately. So I think cut forward, maybe this is like you know, like I want to say like 8 months or so afterwards. You know, things were, you know, we're kind of growing the business. I think Paul Graham decided to invite us over to his place just to talk about like what next steps and kind of building the business would like, you know, like be like. To be honest, I don't really know why he did that in retrospect. I think there was definitely more important people he could have been spending his time with. No doubt about it.
Not.
But he invited us over just to, you know, to talk about the business.
Yeah.
And then I literally remember he sent me this address in South Bay, and we pulled up, drove all the way to South Bay to like this random house, like it's like this random suburban house, and we're like, oh, I was expecting like the YC office or something, but it was literally just a house. Walked into the front doors, knocked on like the doors, and then like this like 6-year-old boy opened the door, and I was like, am I in the right place? Like, sorry, we're here to see Paul Graham. And then he was like, oh yeah, he's right there in the back. Turns out I think it was his grandson. And basically, so we met Paul Graham, and then you know, when we walked in the room, we introduced ourselves. We're like, hey, you know, I'm Han. This is Han B. We're from Mintlify. And literally in the first like immediately, the first thing he said was like, "Oh, Mintlify, like, what a terrible name. You got to change that." And then proceeded to roast our name for like the first 10 minutes.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
But it's become a big name in DevTools, and there's so many great companies using it now. And know that people like I know my friend Flo is a big fan of Mintlify. I've tried it; it's great. Yeah, and so you've, I guess, become, well, no, there's no guessing. You have become an expert in docs now, which is something really hard. So I wonder if you wanted to share a little bit about like.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure founders ask you all the time, like, how do I make good docs?
Yeah. Well, let me actually turn this around for a sec. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. When you think of like great docs, it's like a wonderful doc experience from any company who you might just try to build something, what do you think about?
You know what comes to my head more is like the bad docs.
Yeah.
I feel like it comes, you know, like you don't often think like, wow, this is great docs. I mean, people talk about like Stripe when there's something like outrageous, but like, I feel like it's more like, can I find the thing that I want? Is there lots of like contradictory stuff?
Right.
Is it like unclear which version of the API it is? This sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I would say that if I can find what I want, then it's usually like pretty good. And then everything else is like, I feel like it's like tied up with like, does it work? Like, does it, do I get it? Am I able to do the thing fast?
Yeah, right. So it's like a big part of it is like just being able to get the job done.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, you know, there's of course these gold standards in the industry like Stripe, but a lot of the times a truly well done docs is just the thing that just does the job done in an effective way, right? And I think you've said it, you've really narrated it like perfectly, which is that I think like in terms of technical documentation, it's truly just about figuring out how to like really like make it good by having the right information in place and making sure that it's like also just updated is really just the most important part of it. I would say more than anything else. And so like, because again, like you think of, you just don't want docs to necessarily be a subtractive experience to the users, right? That's when things start to be a little bit wonky, right? Of course, you can always go the extra mile and like, build a ton of things to make it really great. But the first thing you want to do is just to think about like, how do I even just make sure that the content covers everything?
Yeah.
It actually explains, how to use the product really well. It covers the different facets, all the common questions that people would ask, that at least it's there, right? Because one thing to really note is that developers as an audience really like love fidgeting around and doing self-exploration, right? And so oftentimes, as long as it's just properly covered in the content, that's like just the most important thing.
Yeah.
And then I would say in terms of like that kind of like, any kind of advice or strategies, I think people do ask me all the time, it's like, how do I really maintain great docs? And I always say there's like two parts to this. The first part is that like, it's not like a playbook as much as it is just really having a good process and culture around it than anything else.
Yeah.
Like I could sit here and tell you like, oh, great docs equals boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Right? Like a quick start guide, these right links, and all that stuff. But I actually don't think that's really the meat of it. I think building great docs is very similar to, just like building a good product too, And then I could talk a little bit about how I do think docs should be thought of as a product.
Yeah.
But it's really just like, how do you just like, just think first and foremost who your audience is, right? How do you, just make sure that content is on paper, like just that it's there, right? And then how do you just iterate on over time with feedback, right?
Yeah.
And just getting a team to even think of it that way and to make sure it happens, you're there like you're like 90% of the way there, or even if 100 in my opinion, because most people don't do that. Don't do it like that.
Why do most people not do that? Because this feels like it's like something that I guess we all know we should do it. Why?
Yeah. Developers don't like to write. Like I think that's the really the meat of it, right? Like, it's just not in the training, I would suppose. Like like developers got into this industry perhaps choosing to have like, it's, when you're like, in school, you could have chosen the humanities route or you chose the STEM route. Engineers definitely did not choose the humanities route for the most part. And so there's this kind of like, oh, I just don't like the idea of writing as much. And so what I think this kind of like thing to note is like, I think there's really, and to that, there's really 2 points and two things to it is, number one, like, it's truly not like about writing the best, in my opinion, as long as it's just something's out there, right? And so I think to that, like, I always think about how do we make it, really easy for the people who perhaps might not enjoy writing to actually just contribute very easily. So this is one of the reasons why we at Mintlify always took like this docs as code approach of keeping it within the workflow that they're familiar with, keeping it in Markdown.
It's a pretty interesting flow that you've got there.
It's the one that we just kind of like, we're like, this is how we would have wanted to contribute. We wanted to, push out PRs with Markdown file changes, the same alongside the features. And keep it within, the whole technical workflow. Keep it within, you can like, for instance, preview things by pull requests. You could merge it directly into main and then just go straight to prod. Like that's the one that, you and I are, like have always been accustomed to. Make that the experience for the people who should be writing but don't enjoy writing the docs. And
makes sense.
And also build the support system to make sure it happens. And honestly, like I really think it's as simple as that.
And it seems like there's kind of sometimes like, is it important within the company? I think Stripe, they're kind of obsessed with documentation and books in general, I think.
Stripe is very well known for their writing culture, which in one part why they've done such a great job at it. I think they've just like, they have this crazy obsession about like just being able to really put this proper tutorials and explanations out there.
Yeah.
And that's that. But I think in the question of in terms of like how important it is, I always like to think of it from this other perspective, which is like, imagine if you are Stripe for a second. What would happen if your docs disappeared for a day?
Yeah, people are not going to make many changes, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not too many people are going to get started.
Yeah.
Only the really dedicated people that might
Right.
dive in and actually go look at the code.
Yeah, right. Or if you even could.
Yeah, if you even could, yeah.
Right. And so like because I would dare press, it's like if the docs just disappeared for some of these, big dev tool companies, like it's almost to me as if the product has just disappeared, kind of.
Yeah.
People would stop being able to properly use it. People wouldn't figure out how to actually go work with some of the things. And under that light, it's so important to think of it like it's the product, right? And that's always the advocate. I'm the biggest advocate of like, you should just think of docs as the product. It's not like this little side thing that, could like, that you'd want to just like have on the side to kind of like help some people.
Yeah.
But because if that's the case, then sure, like if docs disappear, then you're fine.
Yeah.
But if you're like for a lot of these dev tool companies, it's not.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then you definitely shouldn't treat it like that.
Yeah.
Right. And so, so I think that's just like one big kind of thing I think that I've always been advocating for founders to think about.
Yeah.
And I think the companies like Stripe, like Segment, like Twilio, PostHog, Vercel, these best companies with like incredible technical tutorials, they do that with that belief. And I think that's a key part of it.
And so on like tutorials, do tutorials sit within your docs ideally, or like I feel like sometimes there's kind of a bit of a blur between like blog, articles on their own, or like full guides plus like quick starts and how do you see people doing
like the difference between the different content things?
Do you think it's something I don't know, it just feels like sometimes it could be
it's like it could be all over the place. I think my opinion is that I think that like you can worry all about how to like make it intuitive into structuring things together and making sure that a user goes to the right places at times for the things that like making sure they're discovering the right content. But I really again think that it's the companies that have issues with this stuff and don't do it well. It's often that it's rarely the case that they have information like at too many places and disparate places, but that they don't have it at all. Right? Like that's like to your point, when I asked about what makes good docs, right? Like it's bad when it's not there.
True. That makes sense.
I've rarely seen a case where it's like too many docs.
I guess because we use Google anyway, right? Like it's probably like if you're trying to solve a specific thing, how do I do this in JavaScript?
Exactly. That's why like search is such a functionality is such a huge part of docs. Good SEO, right? It's just crucial.
With like, obviously you got your start with the AI stuff with OpenAI. Do you think are there any things which are making like seriously significant differences to like docs?
100%. 100%. I think there's going to be different waves of changes into the way people think and interact with docs. And I think I'll narrate like kind of the ones that I think first of all has already happened, and I think I'll talk about the ones that I think are still yet to come based on the quality of the models. Which is the first one that's already happened is that people are getting to an answer more directly, therefore actually structuring the docs in the way that they currently is starting to change a little bit. And I'll describe what that means. Basically, the idea is whenever you're thinking about building a docs, or the goal of it, in my view at least, is that you should think of like your docs structured in a way that's kind of like a tree, right? You start from a homepage, and then you branch out into whether it's like if you're looking for SDKs, your SDK references, your API references, or just some sort of quick start tutorial. And any user who comes into it is just trying to either find like a dot on that tree
Yeah.
i.e. like a specific answer to a question,
Yeah.
or they're trying to get to a set of paths within that tree. So for instance, you want to just learn how to figure this out and like you want to learn how to like the thing works,
Yeah.
right? And this is like the critical job of any docs is you want to make sure that things are interconnected, that it's really easy for anyone from any particular point or from the beginning to get to that individual destination. Right? That's like how you think about it. But the first thing that a lot of the LLMs have introduced is this way for you to just get the answer directly without actually thinking about the paths and navigation. This is a nice way of like a really like engineer way of saying that you can now get answers directly to any questions that you have instead of needing to worry about finding the right paragraph or the right keyword or the right answer from a page.
Yeah.
It's all built from content within the doc, so the doc still needs to exist,
Yeah.
right? But if you think about like now what we're seeing is people can go into a docs,
Yeah.
you can literally type in, how do I get started?
Yeah.
And you'll just get the answer right then and there.
Yeah.
Think about how great that is.
That's so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of don't even need to like have the perfect experience for everyone. It's like,
Yeah.
because they'll be able to choose their own kind of adventure there.
Exactly.
If you've got
Yeah.
all the information.
Yeah.
So you're kind of just feeding
Yeah.
ChatGPT or whatever.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
I think this is the first thing that is starting to already change the dynamic of technical content. I mean, as it already has with like ChatGPT, you know, with Stack Overflow, you know, Copilot and all those great things. The way it's kind of like infiltrated into like the docs world for any particular company is like now more and more users are just getting the answers directly to what they're looking for instead of needing to go find the pages, right? It to me kind of feels like this kind of rebirth of like this, you know, prior to, you know, like Google, there was just all these these individual pages back when search engines were just like a bunch of links, you know? And now you have this like magical thing where you can get to the answer directly.
That's so true. That's a really cool way to think about it. Yeah.
Like, does that replace fundamentally like what Wikipedia still is?
Yeah.
No, but it enhances like the way that ability for users to actually get to the answer directly. And I think that's just a way that like LLMs have unlocked this kind of new like, you know, ability that people haven't been able to do before.
Do you think it changes like the role of docs in a sense then in not just in like filling it out, but like if someone does come to you, is it going to be less, there are going to be less people coming to your docs in a sense, but then maybe the ones that come are like expecting more or...
Yeah. I think there's still going to be the two roles to it where it's like, it'll never be like everyone knows, like they'll come in and they'll just simply ask chat and get an answer directly. Because I think there's another part of docs that's super useful, which is to even know what questions to ask and to know what the product does. You know what I mean? I mean, of course you can always ask that, but there's still going to be this kind of like, you know, like it's like even in the world of Google, there's still going to be books, right? There's still going to be textbooks. You need to know what you don't know yet. And I think there's still going to be serving the role in that. I think what AI does is it enhances like this, like kind of like this kind of like optionality depending on the use case. Because the use case of docs, as it often is you just want to get to an answer to fix this like terminal, like, you know, like error message that you're getting, right? That's one big unlock that has never been done before.
So do you think is there now like a point of having like how to do this in, you know, 15 different languages and like how to do this slightly different use case and this slightly different use case? Or like, do we not even, because we could probably just generate those now. Do we need to, is it worth generating something that can be generated by ChatGPT when they need it anyway?
Yes.
Yes.
So on the kind of the note on like the tutorial stuff, I think you described it perfectly. I think we at Mintlify are kind of experimenting with this right now, which is like, could you fundamentally be like, okay, like you're in Java, you're looking at these SDKs, you're looking at these API references, could you just generate me the code snippet that would work based on what you're looking for? There's very specific use cases of this that I think we've discovered, specifically with like when companies have their own SDKs that you want to be able to kind of like add into the docs and really customize it based on what the user is looking for. This is still kind of like early exploration on our end, but we definitely think there's going to be something that kind of changes it a little bit that way. The way we also think about it is we like that the models are getting like better exponentially.
Yeah.
Right. Like every single few months now, you're seeing the like be able to be more accurate, hallucinate less. And so I feel like going back into like my different waves analogy is like when we initially built chat, like even into the product, like a year ago, it like hallucinated like 10% of the time.
Yeah.
And it made it not that great. But it was okay because we can always preface it by saying it's, you know, like it's okay. But now,
people are used to it.
Right? It's gotten to a good enough threshold where it is actually trustworthy, like the vast majority of times. And then the time it's actually wrong is not because of the model, it's purely because of like what content you even have within your docs. Which actually then changed the paradigm of like how you even think about the responses here. And this is like another big part of how, you know, like LLMs have changed the way, you know, like docs have been written now is prior to before, basically like when, you know, docs is, you know, the best data you could have on any docs instance is what pages are people viewing? Maybe they're like, you know, like, is this helpful or not? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Or like maybe they could leave a comment or something and be like, this is bad. And like maybe some edit suggestions, like all that stuff. Right? And like maybe search queries and common keywords. That didn't really actually help that much. What actually does help now is that people, because of chat, are actually asking full-on fledged questions on exactly what they're looking for. And on the right, they're literally getting exactly the responses that the LLMs are generating from the content of the docs. What that means is, let's imagine that you're suddenly seeing a lot of people asking questions that are like, oh, like how do you work with this part of the product?
Yeah.
And the LLMs are like, oh, sorry, like I cannot generate a response for you. I actually have no idea like how this product works.
Yeah.
What does that mean? It means
missing.
The docs aren't there, you know? Like, or maybe even sometimes even worse, like the product should have it, but like, you know, like it's just not there in the product. And that changes the way people are actually writing docs now. And so we're starting to see that a lot of our customers are literally taking that feedback, reading it like every single week or every, like the technical writers that do professional.
You're capturing that information so that they can see it.
And then they're looking at this and they're like, these are the questions, these are the responses. These responses here, not getting answers. These responses here.
It's a killer feature.
yeah, use Mintlify, man.
So, you got me on that one. That's great.
And or like just like these answers are just wrong, you know? Like go fix them. Like I can't think there's a better way to just highlight exactly how you can do that better. And now that the models are there, you're actually able to unlock this change in behavior. And so from like what we've seen, it's like those two main things, from chat to changing the way people are editing the docs, is just the beginning of what I believe will be a long tail of many different ways that kind of like, you know, writing the docs to reading and interpreting as a user is going to be different.
Yeah, that's so cool, actually. It's like you're getting this like constant like feedback of like what people are trying to do.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, Han, that was extremely interesting, and I think I just got sold on Mintlify. So, if you had one takeaway for people listening, what would it be?
Oh man, I'm not a wise guy. I don't have the best advice to give. How about I give a cow joke instead?
Okay, great.
A cow joke. Okay. Why do cows have hooves instead of feet?
Well, why do cows have hooves instead of feet?
It's because they lack toes.
Oh, that is horrendous.
Thank you. I appreciate the pity laugh. Thank you.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Han, thank you so much for coming. Where can people learn more about Mintlify and about you?
Honestly, just look us up on mintlify.com, I guess. But yeah.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jack.
Thanks, Sam, for coming.
Yeah.
And we timed that perfectly because my roommate has just arrived.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, really well done. Yeah.